Hi, this is Dr. David Dobson. Welcome to Conversations. Today, my guest is Chelsea Klassen. We will be discussing Chelsea's master thesis on the role of sports in women's empowerment in Afghanistan. Chelsea earned her an MBA in developmental studies from University of Sussex. It's a pleasure to have you on my show, Chelsea.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such a privilege and honor. So thanks for asking me.
Chelsea, when did your interest in sports begin?
Yeah, so I started in sports ever since I was a little kid. Growing up, I grew up in Canada, so we get exposed to different sports through elementary school. But my particular sport of interest, which is figure skating, I started ice skating when I was probably like 5 or 6, and continued throughout my childhood and into my teenage years, competing and doing figure skating. I really enjoyed the artistic element of that and getting to skate with other skaters, get inspired by them. And then I moved from doing figure skating myself into more of a teaching and coaching role. And I loved teaching new skaters, especially the preschool kids, how to learn to skate. So, uh, mostly figure skating. I did a little bit of cheerleading as well, and I really liked that team aspect and working together that way. And I think it was really cool. A lot of the sports that I did, I worked mostly alongside other women and other girls. So I got to learn, how to work together with other women and other strong women. So yeah.
Very nice, wonderful. Chelsea, for your master's thesis, why did you study women's sports in Afghanistan?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a story, but I'm pleased to share it.
Okay.
So in 2017, I had my first opportunity to go to Afghanistan.
Mm,
I was able to do some volunteer work and worked in some mental health
mm,
organizations, as well as working, looking at implementing the foster care system in Afghanistan. So that was my introduction to the country.
mm,
Um, while I was there, that in my first time, I also got to get connected to some organizations that were working in women's sports in Afghanistan.
mm,
And when I met the women and the girls who were involved in sports, I was so inspired by them. So I started to follow on social media and get connected with other sports organizations that were working in the country. And one of them that I got introduced to was an organization called Free to Run. And Free to Run works with like girls to do different sports, a lot of running particularly, but they also try to introduce women to other sports.
mm,
So I saw actually in 2020, in the winter of 2020, right before COVID, that they were doing a winter sports week with girls, and
mm,
so I knew that ice skating was a part of that, and
mm,
I obviously love ice skating and love teaching to skate. So I asked if I could go and teach, and they said, "Yeah, like we need an ice skating instructor. This is perfect." So when I got there, I loved those few weeks teaching the girls how to ice skate, um, and really seeing how how challenging some of the barriers they were facing were. And so for me, why was I studying women's sports in Afghanistan? Well, I think
mm,
it's that personal experience that I had,
mm,
and seeing the amazing opportunities and things the
mm,
girls were doing in the
mm,
country
mm,
made me like wonder, like,
mm,
why
mm,
are women interested in sports? Why are
mm,
women, despite all the challenges and barriers in
mm,
Afghanistan, why are women wanting to get involved in sports, and what does
mm,
that journey look like for them?
mm, mm.
So that, a lot of personal experience, the women that I met there, the girls that I met there, all of that kind of shaped my research question and why I was curious about knowing more about that.
Mm. Yeah, it's such a beautiful story. Like your passion, your interest, your hobby kind of aligned with the winter sports in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
For your study, for your master's studies, you conducted qualitative semi-structures interviews in Afghanistan. Can you share your research methodology? And maybe you can also share about your research participants.
Yeah, so I started my master's in fall of 2020. It was a unique time to be starting grad school.
Yeah.
I actually never got to go to the UK, which is where my program was. I had to do everything virtually.
Mm,
So, there's a time
yeah.
difference. So
Yeah.
my classes were very, very early in the morning. So my
Yeah.
whole schedule for that year was pretty unique.
Mm,
Um, that said, because of COVID, I also unfortunately wasn't able to actually go to Afghanistan to talk to women and
mm,
girls in person.
yeah.
But luckily, because of my connections and my friends there that were able to connect me to participants, I was able to recruit people through social media, through LinkedIn. And I actually had quite a few people interested in speaking to me, more than I was actually able to talk to, which is a good problem for a
Yeah,
researcher to have. Definitely not a complaint.
for sure.
Um, semi-structured interviews for me was the best way to kind of ask the questions that I was
Yeah.
after. I
Yeah.
wanted to see, what sports were women engaged in, and I had such a diversity of sports, which was really cool.
Mm,
All my participants were 18 to 30, so they were
mm,
within that range that I talked to that were women. And then I had one Afghan man who was a coach of a national team.
mm,
So he was able to share his perspective particularly with coaching, which was, and at the national level. So that was quite interesting to have that perspective alongside the important, the women's perspective.
yeah.
Um, the
Yeah.
sports that the girls played were, yeah, like I said, really diverse. So I
Yeah.
had people who were doing like circus and acrobatics.
Mm,
I had girls that played soccer,
mm,
volleyball, cycling. I think those were kind of the predominant sports. A
yeah.
lot of the sports that require, minimal equipment,
Mm,
like soccer
mm,
and volleyball,
mm,
those are usual sports that, can be easier for women to engage in and those
yeah.
team sports.
Yeah.
The duration of my interviews was probably 45 minutes to an hour, and all the girls that I did speak to did have English,
Mm,
and most of them resided in urban areas. So that was one potential limitation in terms of like my unique interviewees were
mm,
really, they had English as a second language
mm,
or an additional language, and they also were in more like affluent urban areas. But they
mm,
still, I think,
mm,
a lot of the challenges they would face from a cultural
yeah.
perspective would
Yeah.
would still hold no matter where you were talking to them. So
And these were one-on-one interviews with the participants.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
one to one,
Yeah.
just me and the participant. Yeah.
Mm. I know you already mentioned some of the challenge was English, perhaps. Uh, were there any challenges in recruiting participants?
Um, I would say it was like I said, I actually had quite a few girls reach out and be
Yeah.
interested. I think if I were to go back and do it again, I would probably get someone to help translate so I could have a wider
Yeah.
pool of participants. Or if I did extend my master's work into PhD work or further work, that would be one thing I would continue because it was a master's project. I did have to limit the scope a little bit to just
Yeah.
make sure that I was able to like
Yeah.
complete that and move on. Um, so I think 10 participants for the scope of
Mm,
my project was
mm,
probably good.
yeah.
But yeah, expanding, my ability to talk to girls who don't have English as their language, or yeah, as a
Mm,
language would
mm,
have been definitely something that I could have improved on looking
yeah.
back.
And perhaps the technology, because you're doing a remote connection, so obviously you reaching out to these women who have access to computer
Of
and
course.
internet. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a definite concern too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so once you got your data, you did a thematic analysis of your interview data. Can you share your findings?
Yeah. So when I talked to the women and girls,
Mm,
I started to kind of
mm,
create a picture of
mm,
how I saw
mm,
them be inspired and motivated to join sports
mm,
programs.
mm,
And it was a really cool journey. And I think that journey of inspiration isn't just unique to Afghanistan.
yeah.
I think there are a lot of women and girls and even and anyone, boys
Mm,
included, men
mm,
included, who could fit into the cycle that I designed. So mine was called the inspiration cycle, and it really looks at how how women are first inspired to participate in sports. So I asked them what was your how did you start in sports? Kind of like you asked me, right?
Yeah.
Like what got you involved?
Yeah.
And for many of the girls, it was, seeing someone else participating in sports, or for some as well, it was participating in sports with their friends. But many of them talked about seeing, a girl bike by and thinking, I would love to try that.
Mm,
Or seeing, someone playing soccer really well
mm,
on social media, or juggling. There's one
mm.
girl, like I said, who was doing more like acrobatics and circus activities. She's like,
Yeah.
I saw this and I wanted to learn how to juggle. So that visibility of women, and also for women, particularly Afghan women, seeing themselves being represented was a really important part of inspiring them to get involved.
Yeah.
University was also an important time for
Mm,
them. So
mm,
um, that was a time when they were able to kind of get out of their comfort zone, their
mm,
homes. And it's a challenging time for anybody, right? You're learning to balance classes and new friendships and new places potentially. So for them, that was an opportunity for them to start to learn about new parts of themselves, right? Because they're in new situations. So from the inspiration cycle, we move to to um, aspirations,
mm,
where women are really aspiring to make these achievements. So they want to, learn these new skills. They want to achieve these new things. And then we move into motivation, where women are really further motivated. They've seen some of the achievements and they want to continue this this excellence they're seeing through sports.
mm.
So yeah, some of the people I interviewed had been nominated for a Nobel Prize. Some
Wow.
had played basketball with LeBron James. Yeah, these women were really highly achieving. And
Wow.
so, this connection of sports and this ability for sports to provide these opportunities for them was really motivating for them to be excellent at
Mm,
all the things in their life.
mm,
And then finally, I really found women saw sports as a vehicle for hope. So many of them talked about people cheering them on, or people, saying they're representing Afghanistan, and
mm,
seeing that as giving them hope for the future of their
mm,
country.
mm,
And that women can play, as they do, they often play a vital role, but it can be more invisible. I
mm,
think sports elevates women to that more visible kind of in society,
mm,
and women really felt that, they would
mm,
have one example they
mm,
gave was an elderly gentleman cheering them on when they were biking by or running by, and that meaning a lot to them, saying,
mm,
someone you might think, an
mm,
older Afghan man might have these certain preconceptions about a woman participating in sports, but seeing that people of all
mm,
ages, all genders can be really
mm,
cheering them on, really gave them
mm,
hope and continued them, right? So
mm,
as these women get this hope, it kind of they inspire the next
mm,
generation. So that was
mm,
really the cycle that I kind
mm,
of saw
mm,
come through. So those are some of the aspirations,
mm,
motivations, and kind of the cycle.
mm.
And yeah, there was it ended with quite a bit of hope. And all
Mm,
my interviews, I forgot to mention, were done July 2021.
mm,
And August 2021, the Taliban take over.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Uh, what is your hope for women's sports in Afghanistan?
So unfortunately, I would love to say I was very hopeful, and I do think sports still can play a vital role in changing and moving, providing hope for women. But right now, it is extremely dangerous for women to be visibly participating in sports in the country. Women now, unfortunately, when the Taliban took over, they had to get rid of all their sports equipment. They had to burn it. I was seeing girls were burning, destroying their bikes, throwing away all their sport equipments, all their certificates they had. If the Taliban were to find them with those certificates, that could be a very bad situation for those women. So they were burning these certificates. So it's really quite unfortunate. But that said, I know that there's still really good organizations doing good work, and women
Mm,
are still trying to do yoga. They're trying to do sports in their home. They're trying to keep themselves healthy and active,
mm,
and that's really important. So even though we might not hear about it going on, it is still happening.
mm,
It just is happening more secretly because of the security issues and concerns. So I do still have
mm,
hope, and I know that there's
mm,
many women in the Afghan diaspora around the
mm,
world
mm,
who are continually talking about the value of sports and
mm,
the importance of sports. Um, and even looking at the Afghan national teams, should their national teams, their men's teams still be allowed to do sports when
mm,
women are not?
mm,
Can we maybe continue this conversation and look at,
mm,
that as a vehicle to discuss
mm,
inequality and discuss the situation for women now? So
mm,
I'm I'm always inspired by Afghan women and their
mm,
resilience and
mm,
their drive and what they're continually doing. But it is a very dire situation that we need to continue
mm,
to advocate and
mm.
provide solidarity as best we can.
Yeah, 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 for sure. I know you traveled to Afghanistan in 2017. And how long did you stay for your first trip?
Yeah, the first trip was 4 months, so
Oh, you went.
it wasn't
Ah,
a very
okay,
long time.
okay, yeah,
But it was enough that I was able to learn a bit of Dari, a little bit.
okay, okay,
It's been like
okay,
almost, 8 years
yeah,
now, so
yeah,
I'm forgetting a little bit, but it was 4 months. Yeah.
okay. So, can you share what your experience was like?
Yeah. As I mentioned, like
Yeah.
working and interacting with the Afghans and also like the Afghan people and learning the language is a big
Mm,
part of it. And that for
mm,
me was really key to starting to understand the culture. So I think if anyone is able to, have an opportunity to travel somewhere else and stay there for a long, like it wasn't super
mm,
long, but for a
mm,
period of months, it's
yeah.
really important to start language lessons.
Mm,
The Afghan people are so hospitable.
mm,
They're so kind. They're so generous. Um, I learned so much about good community work and how, and, as like I teach in international development at
mm,
UFE, so learning about, how conflict has really impacted development there,
mm,
that was something that I was able to see firsthand. Just the, continued imperialism that has, from the British to the Russians to the Americans and the NATO forces, Canada included, just seeing how that imprint has really affected the Afghan people was quite interesting because I probably haven't been to another place that's had such long-term conflict. So that
mm,
was really interesting. I truly believe in the central part of the country, which is where we did Winter Sports Week, if Afghan didn't have the unfortunate conflict that it's faced, I believe it would be a ski destination. Like it's
yeah.
so beautiful, it's so
Mm,
mountainous, it's really stunning. So the geography is wonderful. Yeah, and I think like learning the language, like I said, really important. And yeah, just the Afghan people are so
mm,
inspiring in so many ways.
mm. Wonderful. Uh, while you were in Afghanistan during that stay, you also taught ice skating to women there. Can you share a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, definitely. Happy to share. So, um, how, yeah, ice skating there, it was interesting. So the Canadian government had funded an ice
Mm.
rink, but unfortunately it wasn't frozen. It wasn't in a place where it could get frozen, which is a bit nonsensical.
I guess, an outdoor skating ring we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah. So we ended up having to go to a lake.
Okay.
So it was so beautiful, like I said, stunning. And yeah, I think it was cool because we would drive to the lake and
Mm,
we would
mm,
do, I brought a big duffel bag of ice skates. I think they
mm,
had some there. So I was trying
mm,
to, we brought over some materials and things. But yeah, for many of the women, it was the first time that they had traveled. So
mm,
the program is really cool in that it takes women from all over Afghanistan. They fly to Bamiyan and then they
mm,
get to learn about ice skating and skiing and other
mm,
sports. So you
mm,
have women from all different ethnicities coming together, and it not only develops their sports skills and their
mm,
social skills, but it also brings together um, like people who might have
mm,
ethnic conflict. So it acts
mm,
as a bit of a peace building tool. And I love
mm,
sports as that peace building tool. I know we have
mm.
rivalries in sports,
Yeah.
but it really was really amazing to see like yeah, women from all different
Yeah.
backgrounds connecting.
Yeah.
And yeah, they liked ice skating. I mean,
Yeah.
there were also like some men and who were coming
Yeah.
from like just, I don't know, they would drive by and they would stop and they would want to try too. So, we let everybody who wanted to try get a chance to try. And they would try
Yeah.
in curling too.
Oh,
Like the
really?
men were more trying like curling because the skates maybe weren't fitting them
Yeah,
the same.
yeah. It's wonderful. And you mentioned that, the sports bring people together, even
Mhm.
if you have hostility, even if you have differences, but it melt away in the sport.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What's next for you, Chelsea?
Yeah, what's next? So, I continue to in my classes talk a lot about Afghanistan, talk a lot
Mm,
about the work that's being done there. I teach a class on Afghanistan, so
mm,
I taught that class I think 2 summers ago, and hopefully we'll teach it in the future.
nice.
So that if students or anyone's interested in learning
Mm,
more about it with me, you're obviously like welcome to join that
yeah.
class. With research, I'm still deciding exactly what I want to do for my PhD. If the Taliban hadn't taken over, I think I probably would have tried to continue to look at
Mm,
sports and ways to support women's sports in Afghanistan. I might still look at that, but I think it's just a different research context.
mm,
Um, and I also try to, support Afghan activists locally. So sometimes having events about Afghanistan, trying to continue that. Um, and yeah, I am hoping to continue doing research. I also work at the Community
mm,
Health and Social Innovation Hub, the Chassis Hub
mm,
at UFE.
mm,
So we do a lot of community research work.
mm,
So just continuing
yeah,
that. But yeah, I'm
yeah.
hopeful that you know, cautiously optimistic that we need to continue supporting Afghan women in
Mm,
however we can and trying
mm,
to raise the issue of gender
mm,
inequality in generally and then sports in particular. So
mm.
yeah,
Wonderful. Thank you for your time and sharing your research with us, Chelsea.
thanks for having me.